The mysterious death of Zubori and the orphaned young boy. Introduction to the village. The village of Okwano sat quietly under the shadow of the great mountain, nestled between thick forests and winding rivers. The air was always filled with the scent of wildflowers and the sounds of chirping birds. The people of Okwano lived in harmony with the land, believing that the spirits of their ancestors guided them and protected their village. Their lives were simple but rich in culture, each day marked by rituals, songs, and the wisdom passed down from one generation to the next. At the heart of the village lived Zubori and his wife, Adoma. They were kind, generous, and always ready to offer a helping hand to anyone in need. Zubori was known for his strength and wisdom, while Adoma had a gift for weaving beautiful tapestries that told stories of their people. Together, they were pillars of the community, loved by all who knew them. But as with all stories in Okwano, peace and tranquility would soon be overshadowed by tragedy. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a stranger arrived at their door. He was a tall man with piercing eyes and a cloak that shimmered in the dying light. He carried with him a basket filled with food, fruits, meats, and delicacies. He claimed to have come from a far-off land, bearing gifts for the good people of Okwano. Zubori, ever the gracious host, invited the stranger in. He and Adoma sat down to enjoy the feast, unaware of the dark omen that lingered in the air. The stranger watched from the shadows as they ate, his eyes never leaving them. Soon, Zubori and Adoma began to feel dizzy and weak, their breaths shallow as they succumbed to an unseen force. They fell into a deep slumber, their lives extinguished without warning. Their young son, had been playing outside that evening. He was only 6 years old and had been chasing the village children around the courtyard. He had no idea that his parents' lives were about to be stolen from them. When he entered the house to fetch a drink of water, he found his parents lying motionless, their faces pale and cold. Terrified, ran to the village elders for help, but it was too late. The elders performed rites to honor Zubori and Adoma, but no one could explain the mysterious death that had befallen them. The stranger who had brought the meal vanished as quickly as he had arrived, leaving only questions and whispers behind. Was it poison? Was it a curse? No one knew for certain, but the villagers believed the spirits had been angered, and the stranger was a messenger of misfortune. Now an orphan, was left alone in the world. He was too young to fully understand the loss, but the weight of it crushed his tiny heart. His life, once filled with laughter and love, was now a shadow of what it had been. Without his parents, he had nowhere to go, and the village, though caring, had no room to take him in. The elders, saddened by his fate, decided that would be sent to live with his Aunt Abeni, a woman who had no children of her own. She lived on the outskirts of the village, in a house that had a reputation for being cold and unwelcoming. There, would begin a new chapter in his life, one that would test his strength and resilience in ways he could never imagine. As he walked away from the home he had known, the memories of his parents lingered in his heart. The village may have been quiet, but there was an unsettling sense of foreboding in the air. The winds whispered of the spirits, and the trees seemed to watch him as he left behind everything he had ever known. The story of Zubori and Adoma, and their mysterious deaths, was just the beginning of a much darker tale that would unfold in the coming days. The cruel aunt and life in harshness. The arrival at Aunt Abeni's house. The journey to Aunt Abeni's house felt long and lonely to As he walked through the dense forest that separated his home from the outskirts of the village, the familiar sounds of his village, the laughter of children, the chatter of elders, grew distant, until only the rustling of leaves in the wind remained. His heart weighed heavily, torn between the memories of his parents and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. When finally arrived at Aunt Abeni's house, he was greeted by a cold, unwelcoming silence. Aunt Abeni's house was far different from his home. Where Zubori and Adoma's house had been filled with warmth and light, Aunt Abeni's dwelling was dark, with thick wooden beams and windows covered by heavy curtains. The air inside was thick and musty, and the smell of something sour lingered, as though the house had not seen a smile in many years. Aunt Ebony herself was a tall woman, with a face etched with bitterness and sorrow. Her hair, once dark and full of life, had turned grey and straggly, as though even the spirit within her had withered away. There were no signs of joy in her eyes, only a cold, emotionless gaze that seemed to pierce right through F. "You're here," she said in a voice that was sharp and cutting. "Don't think you get any sympathy from me. I've had enough misfortune in my life. You'll work hard here, or you'll leave. Do I make myself clear?" F nodded silently, unsure of what else to do. His heart sank further as he stepped into the shadow of the house, feeling as though he were entering a prison. The endless chores. From the moment F set foot in Aunt Ebony's house, his life changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. There was no time for rest or play. Every day, Aunt Ebony set him to work, and the task seemed endless. In the morning, he would rise before the sun and tend to the garden, pulling weeds and watering the plants that barely grew. After that, he was sent to the farm to help with the livestock, feeding the goats, gathering eggs from the hens, and cleaning the stables. By midday, when most children were enjoying the warmth of their homes and the company of their friends, F would be carrying heavy baskets of firewood, sometimes walking miles into the forest to gather what little wood remained. The afternoons were filled with more chores, cleaning, scrubbing, and helping with whatever else Aunt Ebony demanded. It didn't matter if F was tired or hungry, Aunt Ebony never showed any compassion. If he failed to complete a task properly or made a small mistake, the punishment was swift and severe. One day, when F accidentally broke a clay pot while carrying water, Aunt Ebony yelled at him and locked him out of the house until the evening. Another time, when he missed a spot while sweeping the floor, she made him sleep on the hard floor with no blanket. "F, you are worthless," Aunt Ebony would often say, her words cutting deeper than any physical punishment. "Your parents are dead, and that's the best thing that ever happened to this family. You are a burden, a ghost walking this earth." F would retreat into himself after each insult, his heart heavy with the weight of his aunt's words. He missed his parents terribly but knew that he had no other choice but to endure. He tried to be as quiet as possible, staying out of Aunt Ebony's way, but no matter how hard he worked, nothing ever seemed to please her. Life becomes unbearable. As the weeks passed, F began to feel as though he were losing a part of himself. The bright, curious boy who had once laughed with his parents was slowly being crushed under the weight of Aunt Ebony's cruelty. There were no moments of kindness or warmth in his new life. The village children, who once played together with him, avoided him now. They had heard stories of Aunt Ebony's harshness, and they dared not speak to him for fear of earning her wrath. The once beautiful land around Aunt Ebony's house now seemed bleak and desolate to F. The trees that had once been a source of comfort now stood as silent witnesses to his suffering. The animals, the river, even the sun itself seemed indifferent to his plight. One evening, as F sat alone by the small fire pit outside the house, he looked up at the sky. He had always found comfort in the stars, thinking of his parents and wondering if their spirits watched over him. But tonight, even the stars seemed distant, as though they too had abandoned him. He had always believed that the spirits of the land were kind and protective, but now he wondered if they had turned their backs on him, just as his aunt had. He missed his parents with an aching loneliness that made it hard to breathe. In his heart, he wished for some kind of sign, something to show him that there was more to life than the endless suffering he endured. That night, as F lay on the cold, hard ground in the corner of Aunt Ebony's house, his thoughts wandered to the days when he had been happy. He closed his eyes, wishing that the darkness would swallow him whole and take him away from this cruel existence. But little did F know, that in the depth of the forest, a presence was watching over him. It was a spirit, a voice from the past, that would soon awaken within the shadows of the night. This presence would change F's life forever, offering him a chance to escape the cruelty of his aunt and uncover the truth about the mysterious deaths of his parents. For now, though, F's life seemed to have no end to its hardship. The path ahead was unclear, and the pain of his heart seemed unbearable. The forest call. The night of the singing tree. The sun had long since dipped behind the hills, casting an eerie glow over the village. The night air was thick with the hum of insects and the occasional hoot of an owl. Inside Aunt Abiny's house, the flickering flame of a single candle cast long shadows on the walls. F sat quietly in the corner, nursing the bruises from yet another punishment. He had been scolded for the smallest of mistakes, a misstitch while mending one of Aunt Abiny's old shirts. It seemed that no matter how hard he tried, it was never enough to please her. Tonight, his punishment was different. Aunt Abiny, in a rare fit of rage, ordered him to go into the forest and gather firewood, one of the most daunting tasks he had ever been given. The forest was known to be cursed, its deep shadows harboring spirits and creatures that wandered in the night. F had always been terrified of the forest. The villagers told stories of the spirits that haunted it, whispers of the souls of those who had died there, trapped in the trees and the earth, forever bound to the dark. He had heard these stories many times, and each time, his fear grew. But tonight, there was no choice. Aunt Abiny's wrath was far worse than the terror of the forest. If he refused, she would make his life even more unbearable. With a heavy heart, F grabbed his small axe and walked towards the edge of the village, where the forest began. The trees loomed ahead like giants, their dark branches swaying in the wind. The path was narrow and overgrown, the dense underbrush nearly swallowing his small frame. The moonlight barely filtered through the thick canopy above, casting long, twisted shadows on the ground. F could feel the weight of the night pressing down on him. As he ventured deeper into the forest, a sense of dread began to settle in his chest. Every crack of a twig, every rustle of leaves, made his heart race. He gripped the handle of his axe tightly, half expecting something to leap out at him from the shadows. But the forest remained silent, save for the occasional rustle of the wind in the trees. It wasn't until he had ventured farther than he had ever dared to go that he began to hear it, a soft, ethereal melody, carried on the wind. The song was haunting, its notes so beautiful and sorrowful that they seemed to pierce the very air. It wasn't like anything F had ever heard before. The voice, though faint, was unmistakably that of a young woman. F hesitated for a moment, fear tightening his chest. The villagers spoke of spirits that could lure travelers into the depth of the forest with their sweet songs, never to be seen again. But something in the melody called to him, something familiar and comforting, despite the fear it stirred in his heart. Without thinking, he followed the sound, stepping deeper into the darkened woods. As he moved forward, the melody grew louder, clearer, and it seemed to guide him toward something. His breath caught in his throat when he saw it, a massive, gnarled tree standing alone in a small clearing. Its roots twisted up from the ground like ancient serpents, and its bark was rough and cracked, with an aura of age and mystery. The tree was surrounded by a faint glow, as if the moonlight had chosen to settle upon it. The voice, now clearer, was coming from the tree itself. F stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. His fear battled with his curiosity, but his legs moved of their own accord. Slowly, cautiously, he approached the tree, his eyes searching for the source of the voice. And then, he saw her. At the base of the tree, sitting with her back against the trunk, was a young woman. She was clothed in tattered white robes, her long hair flowing like a silver stream around her shoulders. Her eyes were closed as she sang, her voice carrying a sadness that seemed to echo through the forest. F's heart pounded in his chest. He could not believe what he was seeing. The girl before him was not of this world, her form was transparent, glowing faintly in the moonlight. She seemed to exist somewhere between the living and the dead, her spirit trapped within the confines of the tree. The woman's song wove through the air, telling a tale of heartache and loss. F listened intently, unable to tear his gaze away from her. The lyrics, though faint and mournful, painted vivid images in his mind. The woman sang of a love that had been betrayed, of a life taken too soon, and of the endless longing for peace that could never be found. "I am Kemi," the spirit whispered, her voice barely audible over the breeze. "I sing because I have been forgotten, because the world has moved on without me. My spirit is bound to this tree, trapped by the one who betrayed me." F's breath caught in his throat. He had never heard such sorrow in a voice before. He knew that this spirit, Kemi, was not just a wandering ghost, but someone with a story, someone who had suffered. "Why are you here?" F whispered, stepping closer, his fear momentarily forgotten in the face of her pain. Kemi opened her eyes slowly, her gaze fixing on him. There was a sadness in her eyes, but also a spark of hope. "I was once like you, living a life full of promise," she said softly. "But I was betrayed by my own blood, my uncle. He killed me, and my soul has been trapped here ever since, unable to rest. I sing because it is all I can do. Perhaps one day, someone will hear me, and help me." F felt a deep sympathy for the spirit before him. He had never known anyone who had suffered like this, and yet there was something about Kemi's story that resonated with him. She was alone, just as he was. She had been abandoned, betrayed, and trapped in a world that was no longer hers. "I will help you," F promised, his voice filled with sincerity. "I don't know how, but I will try. You won't be alone anymore." Kemi's face softened, and for the first time, a faint smile touched her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "You are a kind soul, F. Perhaps, together, we can find the peace that has eluded me for so long." The song faded into silence, but the bond between them remained. F, now more determined than ever, knew that his life would never be the same again. He had a purpose, to help Kemi, the spirit trapped in the tree, find the peace that had been stolen from her. And as he stood there in the moonlit clearing, the wind began to pick up, as if the forest itself had heard his vow, friendship with the spirit. The encounter with Kemi's spirit. The days that followed were filled with both fear and wonder for F. Each night, as darkness settled over Aunt Ebony's house and the village slept, F would sneak away to the edge of the forest. The thought of the dark woods still unsettled him, but his determination to help Kemi, whom he had come to think of as a friend, was stronger than his fear. The moon was full, casting silver beams through the dense canopy above, as F made his way along the familiar path to the clearing where the ancient tree stood. The sounds of the night seemed to fade as he approached the tree, as though the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting. The air around the tree felt different, heavy, charged with an energy that F could not explain. Every night, the same melody would drift through the still air, a hauntingly beautiful song, now familiar and comforting. It was always Kemi's voice, but this time, it seemed to carry a new depth. There was a quiet desperation in the tone, a pleading that F had not noticed before. He found Kemi sitting beneath the gnarled branches of the tree, her pale figure glowing softly in the moonlight. Her long hair shimmered like silver strands, and her eyes, though filled with sorrow, held a quiet strength. The sorrowful song faded as F approached her, and she opened her eyes slowly to meet his gaze. "F," she whispered, her voice soft but clear. "You've come again." F nodded, his heart filled with both sadness and admiration for this spirit who had endured so much. "I couldn't stay away," he said quietly. "I need to know more about you, Kemi. I want to help you." Kemi gave him a small, wistful smile. "I have told you my name, but you have yet to hear my story," she said, her voice trembling slightly. My life was once full of love and promise, just like yours, but that was before the betrayal. Before my uncle. Kemi's tragic tale. As Kemi spoke, F sat down beside her, his heart aching with every word she uttered. She began to tell him the story of her life, one that was as beautiful as it was tragic. I was once the village's most beloved maiden, Kemi began. My beauty was known far and wide, but it was not just my looks that made me special. My heart was kind, and I had a love for my people, for the land, and for the spirits that guided us. My family was well respected in the village, and I had many suitors. But there was only one who truly captured my heart, Kofi, the son of the village chief. She paused, her gaze distant, as though she were reliving those moments from long ago. Kofi and I were inseparable. We spent our days together, walking by the river, picking flowers, talking about our hopes and dreams for the future. He promised me that we would marry and live a life full of love and happiness. F could feel the warmth in her voice as she spoke of Kofi, and it made the sorrow that followed all the more heartbreaking. But it was not to be, Kemi continued. My uncle is, the brother of my father, was a powerful man in the village. He had always coveted the wealth and respect that my family held. But my father was a man of integrity, and he had always refused to give us the power he craved. My uncle grew envious of the love that Kofi and I shared, and he saw an opportunity to seize everything for himself. Kemi's voice grew quiet, the sadness thickening with each word. One day, when Kofi and I were walking in the forest, my uncle appeared. He told me that my father had promised him a great reward if he killed me. He had made a deal with a rival village to secure power, and my death would be the final piece to his plan. My uncle attacked me. He took my life right there in the forest and buried my body beneath this very tree. Tears glistened in Kemi's eyes as she spoke of the final moments of her life. I had loved my uncle, but he betrayed me, took everything from me. And now, my spirit is trapped here, bound to this tree, waiting for someone pure-hearted enough to help me break free. F's heart shattered as he listened to Kemi's story. He could not fathom the pain she must have felt, betrayed by the very blood she had trusted. He wanted to promise her that he would fix everything, but he knew that it would not be that simple. Her soul had been trapped here for so long, and the mystery of her death still lingered in the air, like a curse that had never been lifted. A bond is formed. After a long silence, F finally spoke. I won't let you suffer any longer, Kemi. I don't know how yet, but I will find a way to help you. You deserve peace. Kemi's eyes softened, and a faint smile played on her lips. You are kind, F. Your heart is pure, just as I had hoped. But be warned, this is not a task for the faint of heart. To free me, you will have to confront not only the truth of my death but also the darkness that binds me to this place. I cannot live without the help of someone who understands both sorrow and hope. F nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I understand. I promise I will help you, no matter the cost. Over the next few weeks, F continued to visit Kemi every night, sneaking away from Aunt Abeni's house whenever he could. As the nights passed, the bond between them grew stronger. They shared stories of their lives, their dreams, and their fears. F spoke of the pain he had felt losing his parents, and Kemi listened, offering him comfort in her own way. In return, Kemi told him of the village she had once known, of the life she had been forced to leave behind, and of the love that had been taken from her. Together, they found solace in each other's company. They became not just spirit and mortal, but friends, two souls bound by the threads of tragedy, but also by hope. F's promise to help Kemi never wavered. He vowed to uncover the truth behind her death and to break the curse that bound her to the tree. As he spent more time with Kemi, he began to sense that there was more to the story than just betrayal, something deeper, something tied to the very spirits of the land. F knew that to truly set Kemi free, he would have to face the darkness that lingered in his own heart and the mysteries of the village that had been hidden for far too long. But for now, he and Kemi were not alone. They had each other, and that was enough to keep the shadows at bay. The plan to free Kemi. Seeking help from the village shaman. F's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts as he walked through the village early the next morning. The sun had barely risen, but already, the village was starting to wake up. Farmers were heading out to tend to their fields, the aroma of breakfast wafted from homes, and children gathered in groups to play. But F could not shake the weight that hung over him. He had promised Kemi he would help her, and now, he felt the burden of that promise grow heavier each day. The more he thought about it, the more he realized there was only one person who might be able to help him. A person who, like Kemi, understood the world beyond the living. The village shaman, Nia, was a woman of deep wisdom and ancient knowledge. She had lived through many cycles of the moon, and her understanding of the spirit world was unmatched in Okwano. F had known Nia since he was a child. She had often offered him gentle words of comfort after his parents passed away. But now, he needed her guidance more than ever. He knew that she was the key to understanding how to set Kemi's spirit free. Nia's hut stood at the edge of the village, nestled between two towering trees, their roots twisted like old fingers. The air around her home was always thick with the scent of herbs, incense, and the earth itself. A smell that calmed the mind and soothed the soul. As F approached the hut, he could already hear the faint sound of chanting, a melody that echoed through the air, calming him even before he stepped inside. The door of the hut was ajar, and F stepped inside without knocking. Nia was sitting at her small altar, her eyes closed in quiet meditation. Her long, white hair hung around her face like a veil, and her weathered hands were folded in front of her. The fire in the center of the hut flickered softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Nia's voice was like a gentle breeze, as if she had known he was coming. "I have been expecting you." F stood at the threshold for a moment, unsure of how to begin. The weight of Kemi's story, of the curse that bound her, seemed too heavy to place on anyone's shoulders. But Nia had always been kind to him, and he knew she would understand. "Nia," F said, his voice trembling. "There is something I need to tell you. Something strange. There is a spirit in the forest. A young woman named Kemi. Her soul is trapped in a tree, and she has been there for years. She told me she was betrayed and killed by her own uncle, and now her spirit is bound to that tree. I promised her I would help set her free. But I don't know how." Nia opened her eyes slowly, her ancient gaze fixed on F. There was no surprise in her eyes, only a deep, knowing understanding. She had heard the whispers of spirits in the wind, and she had seen the signs that had led F to Kemi. "You have a good heart, F," Nia said softly. "You seek to help the lost, the ones who have been forgotten. But you must understand, the spirit world is not always kind. Some spirits are at peace, and others are trapped in darkness. Kemi's story is one of great pain. Her betrayer has tied her to this world. To free her, you must have both courage and wisdom." F nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "I will do whatever it takes to help her. I cannot leave her there, alone in the forest. But I don't know how." Nia stood slowly, her old bones creaking. She walked over to a shelf in the back of the hut, where jars of herbs, roots, and powders were neatly arranged. She pulled down a small, leather pouch and handed it to F. "This is what you seek," she said. "A herb that will allow you to see beyond the physical world. It will reveal the true form of spirits like Kemi. You will be able to see her, and she will be able to communicate with you more clearly. But be warned, F, some spirits do not wish to be seen. They are dangerous, and you may face peril if you venture too far into their realm. Use this herb wisely. F took the pouch, feeling its weight in his hands. Inside, he could feel the faint texture of crushed leaves and seeds, their power contained within. Thank you, Nia, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I will be careful. Nia's gaze softened. You are a brave boy, F. But remember, sometimes, the spirits are not all that they seem. You may think you are helping, but there are forces in this world beyond our understanding. Trust your heart, but always be wary of what you encounter. F nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. What if he wasn't ready? What if the spirits he encountered were not like Kemi, but something far darker? The weight of the task ahead seemed daunting, but he could not turn back. He had made a promise, and he would keep it, no matter the cost. The risk of the herb. That night, as F stood at the edge of the forest once again, the pouch of herbs clutched tightly in his hand, he felt a mix of hope and fear. The path ahead seemed endless, and the darkness of the forest stretched out before him like a great unknown. He took a deep breath, calming his racing heart, and then opened the pouch. The herb inside was a powdery substance, a pale green color with a slight shimmer. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he was doing the right thing. But he thought of Kemi, of her sorrow, of her broken spirit, and knew that he had no other choice. He gently sprinkled the herb over his eyelids, breathing in its scent. Immediately, a strange warmth spread through his body, and the world around him began to shift. The trees, the earth, the sky, they all seemed to blur, as though the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds was thinning. With a final glance at the village behind him, F stepped into the forest, his senses heightened. The air felt thick, charged with energy, as if the very forest was alive and watching him. The shadows seemed deeper, the sounds of the night sharper. F walked toward the clearing where he had met Kemi before, his heart pounding in anticipation. As he reached the tree, the world around him shifted again. The tree's gnarled branches seemed to come alive, stretching toward him, and the air hummed with a strange, otherworldly energy. And then, he saw her. Kemi stood before him, not as the faint, glowing spirit he had seen before, but as a full, vivid form. Her eyes met his, filled with sadness, but also a flicker of hope. F could see her clearly now, her ethereal beauty, her grace, and the pain that clung to her like a shadow. I can see you, Kemi, F whispered, his voice filled with awe. You're real. Kemi smiled softly, her voice a gentle breeze. You have come to help me, F. Now, we must face the truth together. The herb had opened the path to the spirit world, and F knew that this was just the beginning. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but with Kemi's spirit guiding him, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had promised to help her, and now, he would do everything in his power to free her from the chains that bound her to the world of the living. The final revelation and resolution. The truth behind Kemi's death. The forest was still, the night air thick with the weight of anticipation. F stood before Kemi, his heart racing, his senses heightened by the powerful herb he had applied earlier. The spirit before him was no longer a faint, glowing figure but a full, radiant presence. Kemi shimmered with an ethereal light, her beauty beyond what F could have imagined. She looked as though she had stepped from a dream, her long, silver hair flowing in a breeze that did not exist, and her eyes reflecting the sorrow of 1,000 lost souls. As the fog of the spirit world cleared around them, F saw Kemi in her truest form. There was no mistaking her now, she was real as the earth beneath his feet. His pulse quickened, but so did his determination. He had come this far, and now, he would see this through to the end. Kemi spoke, her voice gentle yet filled with an undeniable weight. F, you have freed me from the confines of the tree. I am no longer a shadow, bound to the world of the living. But my spirit still lingers in the stories that are untold, in the injustice that has yet to be righted. F stood silent, listening to her words with a heart heavy with empathy. He had felt her pain, had heard the sorrow in her voice from the very first night. And now, more than ever, he understood that her final wish was not just to be freed from her physical prison, but to have her story heard, to have the truth of her death shared with the world. I want to be remembered, Kemi continued, her voice barely more than a whisper, as if speaking louder might cause her to fade away. I want my story to be told so that the world knows the truth of what happened to me. My death, the betrayal, the suffering. Let them know that I was not forgotten. F's heart ached for Kemi, and with renewed resolve, he promised, I will make sure that everyone knows. Your story will not fade into the shadows. I will speak for you, Kemi. Kemi's eyes softened, a light of gratitude shining through her sorrow. Thank you, F. You are my last hope. The village elders and the investigation. The next morning, F made his way to the village elders' gathering place with Kemi's story weighing heavily in his heart. The village was bustling with activity, the sounds of people preparing for the day echoing through the air. But F walked with a sense of urgency, a sense of purpose that he had never felt before. He entered the circle where the elders met, their wise faces turned toward him with knowing eyes. They had seen F grow from a young boy into a man, and though they had always offered him comfort after his parents' death, they had never truly known the depth of the sorrow in his heart. F, the eldest of the village elders, Namdi, greeted him with a nod. What brings you here today, my son? F bowed his head respectfully, then straightened, meeting Namdi's gaze with a fire in his eyes. There is something I must tell you, something that cannot remain hidden any longer. It is about the death of Kemi, the young woman whose spirit I've been trying to help. She was killed by her uncle, who betrayed her out of greed and jealousy. He killed her and buried her beneath the tree in the forest. The elders were silent for a long moment, the air heavy with disbelief. F could see the shock in their faces, their eyes narrowing as they processed his words. The truth of Kemi's death was a story that no one had dared to speak before, a dark secret buried beneath years of whispers. I've heard the stories, F continued, his voice trembling but resolute. I've heard the song of her spirit, and she has told me the truth. Kemi's uncle betrayed her, and now her spirit is trapped in that forest, yearning for justice. I know it is true because I have seen her. I have spoken to her. And I will not rest until the truth is known. The village elders exchanged looks of unease and sorrow. The truth of what had happened to Kemi was a wound the village had long ignored, but now, it could no longer be hidden. We must investigate, Namdi said finally, his voice thick with emotion. This is a grave matter. If what you say is true, we have wronged Kemi's spirit by allowing her uncle to live freely among us. We will not turn a blind eye to this any longer. Kemi's uncle confronted. The elders acted quickly, gathering the people of the village for a council meeting that afternoon. The air was thick with tension as everyone gathered, and F stood beside the elders, his heart beating faster with each passing moment. He knew that the time for the truth to be revealed had come. When the village chief entered the gathering space, there was an immediate hush. He was a tall man, his presence commanding respect, but now there was a tension in the air that made even his confident stride falter. Now an elder in the village, had long held a position of power, and his reputation had been one of strength and wisdom. No one had ever suspected him of wrongdoing, until now. Namdi spoke, his voice firm and commanding. The time has come for the truth to be revealed. You stand here today not as a leader, but as a man accused. The truth of Kemi's death has come to light, and you must answer for your actions. The village fell into complete silence as all eyes turned to His face remained stoic, but there was something flickering in his eyes, something that F could not quite place. Accused. Isa's voice was cold, his tone filled with defiance. What are you speaking of? I have done nothing wrong. But F could not stay silent any longer. He stepped forward, his voice unwavering as he confronted the man who had killed Kemi. You killed her, Uncle Is, F said, his voice steady. You killed Kemi in the forest, out of greed and jealousy. You betrayed her trust, and you buried her beneath the tree, hoping that her death would never be discovered. The elders gasped in shock, and a murmur rippled through the crowd. Isa's face paled, his eyes shifting nervously as the truth hung in the air like a heavy fog. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke in a low, defeated voice. Yes, he admitted, his words bitter. I killed her. She was the most beloved in the village, and I could not stand the thought of her marriage to Kofi. I wanted to control everything, her beauty, her love, and her future. So, I ended it. I buried her beneath a tree, and I thought I would be free. But the guilt has haunted me every day since. Her spirit was never at rest, and now I see that it is my own soul that is cursed. The crowd was silent, the weight of his confession settling over them. Kemi's death had been a secret too long hidden, but now, the truth had come to light. Kemi's burial and freedom. The village elders wasted no time. The ceremony to give Kemi the proper burial she deserved was held the very next day. The people of Okwano gathered at the clearing in the forest where Kemi had been killed, and they brought her body, now on earth and carefully prepared for the rites of passage, back to the village. Kemi's spirit appeared before them, her form now radiant and whole, no longer bound by the chains of her untold story. She stood tall, her eyes filled with peace. F was by her side, his heart swelling with pride and sorrow, knowing that his promise had been fulfilled. I am free, Kemi said, her voice soft yet powerful. Thank you, F. You have given me the peace I sought for so long. I will always remember your kindness. The village performed a final, beautiful ritual for Kemi, honoring her life and the legacy of her spirit. Her body was laid to rest in a place of honor, beneath the shade of a mighty tree, where her memory would live on for generations. The people of Okwano, once unaware of the tragedy that had befallen her, now understood the truth. Kemi would never be forgotten. As the ceremony concluded, Kemi's spirit slowly faded into the sky, her body and soul now at rest. F stood there, his heart heavy with emotion, but also filled with a sense of peace. He had kept his promise, and in doing so, he had set a soul free. The village, too, had been freed from the shadows of its past, and the truth, at last, had been revealed.